Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Greetings of peace, love, and light. Wishing everyone a blessed Ramadan. Praying that you're well, praying that you're safe. This is a strange time, a difficult time. And so we're just sending love and light to you in this time and praying that we all get through this and that we all come out of it better than before, that we learn our lessons and that we're purified by this and we're transformed by it for the better. And we brought our brother Abdallah Rothman in to have a conversation. He is someone who, when it comes to matters of the heart, matters of psychology and spirituality, he's always someone who has great insights. So we speak to him in this podcast about, how to navigate these difficult times and how to make the most of them in general, and then particularly in the month of Ramadan, and how to approach our spiritual practices for this month and our fasting for this month, given the unique situation we're in and that we're not able to gather, we're not able to go to the mosque, we're not able to function in the usual ways that we are. So I hope you enjoy that. Also, I wanted to mention we do have a course. Rumi Center for Spirituality and the Arts has partnered with Wasat and presented a course called The Book of Love. It's a course that goes the entire month of Ramadan. Videos, readings, reflection, a group who engage in sharing and writing and interacting with daily readings from the Holy Quran and looking at what the great sages and saints have said about the Holy Quran as the book of love, and particularly the Quran's treatment of love. So it's been wonderful. We just started a few days ago, but we're still in the first week. So if you want to join, the registration should be closing soon. But as long as you catch it before the end of the first week, you should be able to catch up, inshallah. So if you're interested, visit rumicenterworkshops.com. And you'll find the registration there, inshallah. Other than that, I want to thank everyone for supporting Path and Present Podcast, particularly those who've been giving through our Patreon. You're the ones that keep this alive. If you want to support, you can go to patreon.com/pathandpresent and give a monthly amount of any amount, and that helps continue these discussions. All right, y'all. Assalamu alaikum. So we are in the times of the coronavirus, the pandemic. We are all forced inside, and more ways than one. We're physically forced inside, but it's also forced, I think, a lot of us to be introspective and be contemplative and to, in many cases, actually face uncomfortable things, fears, uncertainties, our own mortality at the root of all that, right? So as somebody, like yourself, who is a deep student of the kind of psycho-spiritual tradition of Islam and wellness, spiritual and mental and physical wellness, what are some of your thoughts just being kind of locked down now for a month and a half?
Yeah, it's a lot of things. There's so many levels and layers to this experience. And on the surface level, or I wouldn't want to say surface, but on the outer level, there's just the concern of public health and safety, which is a obvious, real concern. And it's both like being cautious of taking care of being safe, but then also like being compassionate and understanding that a lot of people are suffering, whether they have the virus or they're in situations where they can't really just retreat. Like there's a lot of people out there on the front line, as they say, without really the privilege of being able to stay safe. And so that also puts in a whole lot of layers of perspective of just like the systemic situation of like who's out there put in positions and who has the privilege of being able to, there's these hashtags of like stay home, stay safe, which is great public health advice, and it's also for a certain privileged section of the society that has the ability to do that. And that can even go on levels of like who has a home or who's able to be safe. So there's that, and then there's, you say, from like a mental health and a psycho-spiritual Islamic spirituality perspective, thinking about this time of retreat, this is like you said, it's forced to go inside, and really it's like forced khalwa. Where those of us who do have that privilege to stay safe and stay home are now find ourselves in khalwa, not by choice, right? It's not like we prioritized this. It happened and we're there. And so to see it from this perspective, a lot of like we look a lot of the spiritual elders of the tradition, and you read books about these sort of like zahid, like these ascetics who go away from the dunya or go away from the busyness and retreat. This would be sort of a welcomed spiritual challenge, or even just opportunity to connect with the self, because this is how we connect with Allah, right? And so from that perspective, you can see how that could be a welcomed opportunity, a welcomed sort of spiritual opportunity to go deep and reflect. But that requires maybe this is also a privilege or prerequisite to like have that knowledge and have that attitude about this interpersonal reflection, and have some sort of baseline of having done that work to where you can say, alhamdulillah, I have this time to be with myself. Whereas for a lot of people, talking about this other type of lack of guidance or lack of privilege, is not having the tools or not having the experience of having really been with yourself for very much, or taken that time to reflect. What happens is there's a lot of things that go unchecked, and a lot of internal complications that come in terms of like psycho-spiritual state and somebody's mental health even, that when you're forced to come into yourself and to be in this forced khalwa, you are faced with yourself. And for a lot of us, for a lot of people out there, this is like the first time that they've been faced with themselves, because they don't choose to come into reflection of their self or being with themselves. And so when it's forced and you don't have the tools, that can actually be really scary, and it can be somewhat problematic and even dangerous, because people are squeezed. People are squeezed in this time, and if you don't have the tools of just sort of understanding mental health, it can be a huge challenge in a widespread way.
Yeah. I mean, we are forced to really sit with ourselves and confront with ourselves. I mean, there's only so much Netflix you can watch, right? There's only so much distraction you can have. And I think especially in times of uncertainty, it's not like it's a time where we're all just like inside, but we're joyous. There's a lot of concern and uncertainty and fear for our physical safety, fear, a lot of people fearing for their financial security, stability, um, and also just things like not being able to see your loved ones, not being able to hug anyone, not being able to have intimacy, with and joke and laugh and have your social interactions. So we're all really kind of cut off in a sense, and really forced to be with ourselves, as you mentioned. So you mentioned some of these tools. I wonder if you would elaborate a little bit on tools for introspection and being with oneself, and doing that work that you speak about?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's levels to it, because we can say like, okay, the tools are, let's say, self-reflection and coming into a state of being present with the self. And a lot of people are talking about doing yoga and meditating, and but to be honest, like those are things that you have to establish in order to benefit from them. They're not necessarily things that work in crises,
Mm,
right? If you haven't learned how to come into a place of calm, and it's not a familiar place for you, you can't just call on it when you're in a state of anxiety. It's something you have to build towards and establish. And so, for those who have an established practice, or at least have been introduced to it, then you can use those tools to deepen. But I would say for people who maybe don't have a familiarity with some of those practices, really it's about some behavioral changes at first, right? Some situating your space to adapt to the new situation that will create a container for better coping, let's say. And so some of that can be, not responding or to this in a normal way. Like this is not normal. It's not what we've been used to. And so if we use the same coping mechanisms, or even just can carry on with the same lifestyle, that can not work. And so what it means is like maybe some of the first things is to look at changing your home. Like, so for those of us who have the privilege of staying home, let's say, um, not treating your home in the same way that you would have before, right? Because for a lot of people, the home was just the place you came to rest after you did your busyness in the world. And so for a lot of people, what that meant was you come home, you sit on the couch, you watch Netflix, you eat, and you sleep, right? And so if that is the physical space, is that if that's what you're used to using it for, and you go into that same mode of sort of disconnecting, that's going to be unhealthy. And so what that means is you got to like change that space and have a different relationship to it, so that it's not only your place of retreat and comfort and sleep and physical nourishment, but like productivity, creativity, um, uh, social engagement. Like there's all these things that we need as people to fill these buckets to keep us balanced and mentally healthy,
mm,
that are our social, emotional, behavioral, physical, right? And so usually in our lives, we fill all these things in very different places. We go to a gym to work out. We go to wherever we hang out with our friends and we connect with a social network. We go to an office to do work. We go to a restaurant to eat. And so now all these things are having to be in one space. You've got to have a different relationship to that space. So that might mean moving furniture around. It might mean reallocating spaces in your home and saying, okay, this is the productivity space.
mm.
Even if you're confined to a smaller apartment, like, it's more symbolic than it is, practical sometimes. I know for me, physical exercise is really important for my routine and my mental health. And I did that in a gym, and I can't do that now. And so I knew that was important for me. So I went before like stores closed down and stuff. I went out and just as a mad rush and got as much home workout equipment as I could find. And a lot of it was sold out, and a lot of it was too expensive. But I made do, and I created a space. Um, Thankfully, I have a little outdoor space, so that's good as well. And that's been my saving grace. And so instead of saying like, oh, I can't go to the gym, so therefore I can't be physical, or even saying like, well, it's not going to be the same, so I'm gonna, I had to sort of do some research online, like what can I do to fill the same physical routine that I had, and shifting it to like some more at-home practices. So that's like maybe using more body weight, exercises or whatever it is you have to do, you have to use that ingenuity to adapt.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I really like that piece you said. I mean, I like it, but it's real, and it's unfortunate in the sense that, you know, if you haven't been cultivating a practice, like you say, when crisis hits, you're not going to be, it's not like that's the time where you're going to, okay, now I'm going to learn to,
Yeah,
it's just
you're just
like
gonna breathe.
if you're not training in the martial arts, when someone attacks you, you're not going to learn how to fight then. Like, you know what I mean?
Right,
Like, you're in trouble,
right.
And so, and that's, I've thought about that. We talk about often, right? On the spiritual path, we talk about having a practice, or, you say someone's a practicing Muslim or whatever, the word
Mm-hmm.
practice. And, obviously, like, many of us grew up playing sports, right? And so it's really interesting because there's such an analogy, like, your practice is what prepares you for the game and the fourth quarter, and when it's all on the line, and it's like, did you really, how prepared are you for the moment when it comes? That's what practice is about. And I think, as believers, our practice is about, I mean, it's really all preparing us to, it's like dress rehearsals for Yom Qiyamah. Like, that's what Salat is, right? Prayer is the standing.
Yeah,
It's standing in the divine presence. And of course, it's not actually a dress rehearsal because, as we know, we're always in the divine presence. It's
mm,
about actually making ourselves aware of that, awakening into that now. And if we don't do it here, we're not going to be able to do it there. So may
right.
Allah assist us in that here. So I've also been thinking about that. Like, this is what we've been training for. This is what we've
Yeah,
been praying for,
yes.
prayer and fasting. Ramadan's a big kind of sit with yourself, and you can't just eat, and you're uncomfortable and your head hurts, and you can't, you don't even want to go, right? In Ramadan, often you don't want to go do social things because so much of social life is eating and drinking coffee and whatever, and
Yeah,
you're like, you just want to be, so we kind of have to go through that fire of 30 days every year, where it's like, no, I have to be with myself. I can't just, so all these practices can be means for that. And the other piece that you mentioned about rearranging your space, I thought about that a lot because, I mean, I've heard from many of my dear respected elders and teachers, one of the most important things you can do in your home in any time is to have a space that is your sacred space. It is for
yeah,
worship only. And,
right.
if you can have a whole room, have a whole room. But many of us, we don't have the space for that. So at least have a corner of a room.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's even recommendation, have a specific set of clothing that your best clothing that you only wear for prayer, you
Right,
only wear for the last third of the night, and have your best perfume that you don't actually wear out, you wear for, but there is something about that
right.
intentionality and honoring the space and honoring the practice that then, increases the transformative effects of it. So I also was thinking about that when you were mentioning, yeah, have a workspace, have a play space, have an exercise space, have a sacred space. And sometimes, that it might even all be in the same room, but you can have your,
Right, right.
yeah.
Or maybe you have to, yeah, you have to rearrange things for each time
Mhm.
and bring out the things that remind you that it's now sacred time. I think what it is it's a wake up call. It's a wake up call to come back and remember what we should have been doing before, and what we need. You said it's a practice, it's an ongoing thing. And I think this time of the coronavirus is a wake up call. And similarly, Ramadan is a wake up call, because what it does is it brings us back and says, okay, for this 30 days, it's a sacred month. So there's significance in it, but then we have this obligation. We're obliged to increase our practices, increase fasting, increase reading Quran, increase self-reflection. And for many of us, like, that's the time when we do those things. Like people break out their prayer rugs for Ramadan, right? And the
That's what I
whole
think.
notion,
Ron. Yeah.
yeah, and the whole notion is that all of these things, the Prophet ﷺ did these daily throughout the year. And so, these aren't things that are reserved for a certain time, but the reason why we come into an intense retreat where we do more of it is to reset, and it's like a big reminder saying like, look, if you haven't been doing this, this is what you have to do, at least this portion of this 1/12 of the year. You've got to get this connect in these ways just so you can keep a baseline. Because if you let that go for a whole year and you haven't done anything, then like you're gonna be in trouble. And what that means is you're gonna lose this capacity to cope with being human, right? And staying human, right? And being connected to your being. What you'll do is you'll get too far from off course, and you'll get caught in the dunya and get caught in this sense of separation, self-direction, right? And so it's saying like, hey, it's this rope that brings us back before the end of for this time each year. Say, look, you got to come back, otherwise you're gonna stray too far. And so, but similarly, we need to think about this on a more spread out throughout each year, and if we can bring this into our lives so that we're deepening our practices, then I think that's why this is a wake-up call, is in this forced khalwa of the coronavirus. It's like, ooh, I'm now really aware of my blessings. I'm really aware of what I don't have. Like I maybe didn't work enough on this thing because I'm really struggling with it right now. Like if you are having a hard time, communicating with your loved ones and working as a partnership, like, and that's breaking down, like that's a wake up call. Like, okay, we needed to be sort of tending to our relationship more often and better. And so now is an opportunity to do that work, and not to do it just for this coronavirus period or just for this 30 days of Ramadan, but to do it because this is what needs to be established as a practice. We establish the salah. We don't just pray it when we feel like we're in the right state. Establish the salah means put it in place so that it becomes a rope for you to come back to, and becomes this resource for you.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful advice. And I think behind this is a profound psycho-spiritual tradition, awareness of what the human being is. And I know you and I love to discuss this topic, and we've had a couple podcasts kind of diving into it. But for those that aren't as familiar, it's like the spiritual practices are not just hoops to jump through to make God happy, right? But because if every being was as obedient as the greatest angel, it wouldn't increase the creator in anything. And if everyone was as rebellious as Iblis, it wouldn't decrease him in anything. But that these are methods for us to come into the fullness of who we are. And, we often think that, it's natural actually to think that we will increase ourselves in happiness by getting what we want and like feeding the self and serving the self and pleasing the self, right? That's like kind of the initial reaction you would think, like the more I have and the more joy, the more pleasure, I'll be happier. But what all the world wisdom traditions are unanimous in is that that's actually very short-sighted, and it will only lead to suffering ultimately. But that there is a way to attain a level of joy and happiness um, within, regardless of the changing of circumstances. And if you think about, like you mentioned the word khalwa, which is, you could say, seclusion, retreat, isolation. And each tradition has a profound practice of this, of course, we think of the monks in the monasteries or their mountaintop seclusions, or um, the sadhus
Mm.
in the wilderness, or the shaman who is training, and so he's in the jungle all by himself in this vision quest for a number of days or weeks, even months. And but then there's this kind of reintegration into society, and I think even both the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and the great sage, the Buddha, they called their paths the middle path. It's very interesting, right? That they
Yeah,
both share
yeah.
that. This is the middle path. And both of them were saying that, and I'm sure there's many levels of commentary we could draw, but both of them were saying that in relation to those who went to extremes in devotion and worship, even, right? Because the Buddha had been around extreme ascetics, who, people that didn't eat, or that that they thought he had inclined towards the world because he ate a grain of rice.
Right.
They wouldn't eat anything, and they would stare at the sun until they fried their eyeballs. People that did really extreme things. And he said, like, no, yes, there should be a level of self-discipline and self-renunciation and like
Hmm.
fasting and silence and solitude, but there should also be a healthy engagement with the world. And of course,
Yeah.
the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, likewise, one of his sahaba was spiritually inspired by him and said, I'm going to fast every day, and I'm never going to get married. And and the Prophet, he said, I fast and I eat. He said,
Yeah.
I go into seclusion and I marry, So this middle path of engaging the world. But and that's really, I always thought that about Ramadan. Every tradition has like the generality of believers, and then the kind of like elite. I mean, we don't like that word elite, but the elect, those who choose to devote their entirety to this spiritual practice, right? So you
Right.
think of it like the path of salvation or the path of sanctification. Like, I'm going to be a believer and do the basics and make Toba when I falter, versus those that are like, I'm going to devote my entire being to this, right? And in many traditions, they develop actually like a monastic order where it's like you make these vows and you separate from society. But Islam, of course, doesn't have that. It has but that's one thing about Ramadan. It's like everyone is a monk for 1 month of the year. Like, you have to,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
completely fast for 30 days. That's something that, really the elect do in other traditions, but everyone does it
Right.
for this 1 month. So
Yeah.
anyway, those are just some of the thoughts. I don't know if you have some reflections on that.
Yeah. It is. It's it's so funny to reflect on, like, seeing people suddenly have this like superpower of being able to fast, and you share it with like non-Muslims, look at that and like, what? You're fasting every day, 30 days, no water. I mean, it seems like it for people on the outside or looking inside, it seems absurd and it seems extreme, right? Um, but it's extreme because we tend to do the other extreme. Like, when we're not told to do this. Like, I was reflecting on this, like, how many people would do this by choice? Everyone, like, a lot of people get excited for Ramadan. Like, last night, my daughter was like so excited for Ramadan, and I was like, and she's 11. I was like, why? What's exciting about it for you? Like, what is it? Why? You're not going to be able to eat. Like, is that exciting? And she's like, yeah. It's. I said, what is it? She said, I don't know. She said, there's some magic. There's some magic of Ramadan, and it feels special. And there's this time, and so, but my daughter also, that same person is loves food and loves to eat and is like a foodie, and you know, there would she decide, or would we all decide not to eat for 30 days? No, we would not. Because it seems like an inconvenience, it seems like a challenge, and so you talk about the middle path. The way to walk on this path, this middle path, is to find balance, and oftentimes that in order to find balance is the pendulum swinging. You go from one extreme to the other, and our tendency as human beings is to fluctuate, like the nafs, this aspect of our physical manifestation of our souls. There's this activity, there's this fluctuation, there's this dynamicism. It's like it's changing. The Prophet ﷺ talked about the heart as this bubbling pot of water, right? And the bubbles that come to the surface are this emotional reactivity and sort of response and reaction to the ups and downs of the experience of life. Sometimes we are happy, sometimes we're depressed, sometimes we're enjoy to be with people, sometimes we're in loss of being with people, and this is just the nature of the dunya, is between these polarities. It's this delusion or illusion of duality between these different extremes often. And so in order to find tawheed, in order to realize the oneness, is where you can only realize that here, which is here is like the middle, but it's also here in like the present, being present with where you are, because often the extreme is like going there or having some sort of intention and action to do one extreme or the other, versus to sort of sit and be willing to go with what unfolds, and to notice where you are in the moment, to be able to respond to what's the healthier way to go. Like to be able to be balanced, to be able to have that wasatiyah, that middle path, means you have to be in tuned and responsive to what is healthy in the moment, versus even these ascetics in the time of the Buddha, they had a himma, they had a motivation to be in fana, to get beyond the self, but it was still a drive. It was still this human nafsi drive. Oh, I want to kill my nafs. I want to get beyond the self. And so I'm going to stare at the sun. I'm going to make the decision to actively put myself in difficulty to get through this thing, versus sort of being adi about it, sort of chilling out and paying attention and be like, okay, well, is that what's best for me right now? Is that what God is telling me to do, or is that what myself is telling me to do? And this is where, coming into learning how to receive guidance and respond to guidance is where you really find the true middle path. A true middle path is doing what makes most sense, or what's best for you at this time. And we don't know what's best for ourselves. Only God knows what's best for ourselves. And so it's not relying completely on our own decision and self-direction and rational thought, but learning to submit and surrender to what is unfolding. And so coming back to this notion of like this wake-up call that we're in, it's being present with like where are we, we're in Ramadan, we're in this pandemic, and being able to be tuned in to what's happening and be with it, and that's where the growth happens.
Yeah, no, I think that's real. And I think maybe because we're beginning Ramadan, and people are used to often getting their spiritual sustenance from community, or for going to the mosque and the nightly prayers, etc. and that's absent. And I think that's really daunting for a lot of people. I mean, myself, I feel a sense of sadness, because those
Mm,
are things I deeply enjoy.
yeah.
But that said, do you have any reflections on how people can use this time, which is like, you know, if you think of, Imam al-Ghazali says that the four pillars of the spiritual path of really like spiritual growth are silence, solitude, sleeplessness, and Saum. Right? Saum is, you
Mm.
have to make it that an Arabic word to make it four S's, but Saum means fasting, right? So that's how I remember it. But essentially, speaking little, and being in a state of silence, um,
Mhm.
waking up in the depths of the night and giving life to those. Solitude, i.e., khalwa, being in a state of retreat, and which again, of course, sitting with oneself, a state of introspection, and then fasting, from food and drink. Now, all of these are essentially, and he actually says this, that all of these are closing the doors of the heart that open to the outside world. Right. So if you
Mm.
think about our
Right.
heart, it has the senses, and that's how we, right, from food and drink and what we take in with words and interaction, and we take in all these things. And Imam al-Ghazali says, right, because for modern people say that's stark, that's austere, that's extreme. Like, what's the point?
Mm.
But Imam al-Ghazali says, and this is the key really, is that because you only would think that's austere and stark if you didn't know that there's another door in the heart.
Mm.
And it's the door that opens inward, and it
Right.
opens into the divine presence. So we have the doors that open out and the doors that open in. And he says, in reality, especially in the beginning stages of the path, the only way you can get openings into the inner door is to close the outer door.
Yeah.
He said,
Right.
eventually you get to a point where you can have them both open at once. But
Yeah.
at first, you need to close those doors.
Yeah.
And another analogy he used, he said, we have this pure water, like this pure elixir of life bubbling up from within us. But we have the, like, if we think of our being as like a pool or a pond, at the bottom of it, there's this elixir of pure, the fons vitae, the fountain of life. But we have these streams pouring in with polluted water that are polluting this, right? And these are through the senses. We take in all of the heedlessness, and we speak the words, and we see things and hear things, and it clouds over that pure water. And so basically
Mm.
closing the senses is draining the swamp, so to speak, right?
Yeah. Training this one.
And so, you know, I say that to kind of preface the question, which is, we're really kind of forced to close the doors to the world in more ways
Yeah.
than usual. Because in Ramadan, we have to a large extent, with food and other things. But now we're really have to be kind of alone doing all that. So I don't know
Yeah.
if you have
Yeah.
any advice
Yeah.
or reflections for people that find themselves in that position and want to, approach it in the most beneficial way for spiritual growth and for well-being.
Yeah. I think it's a really acute, thing to focus on at this moment. And I think so many of us, so many people's experience of Islam and Ramadan is social. It's like, even when you say we close the doors in Ramadan to food and it's inward, but really for a lot of people, Ramadan is about going to iftars, right? And it's social.
Staying up all
It's the
night and
time
eating and hanging
you
out.
stay up all night in the suhoor tent. I know here where I live in the UAE, there's suhoor tents that go till 5 a.m. It's a party. And it's, you're with your friends and you're socializing, and it's like almost hedonism in some ways. It's food all night and music and a party. But that's another thing. But really, regardless of that, even if it's spiritual, oftentimes the spirituality and the connection is through other people, right? You go to Taraweeh prayers is a communal thing, whereas that's not. A lot of people think Taraweeh can only be prayed with people, and that's not the case. And people are going to learn that this Ramadan. But Imam Malik, prayed Taraweeh at home often. So I was talking, some people feel like they're going to be cut off from their experience of Ramadan, or their experience of Islam is in Jama'at, it's with people and it's community. And I had a sister the other day ask me, what isn't so much, she said, my way of connecting, our way of connecting in Islam is, so much of it is a big part of it is community. And I said, yeah, it's a part of it. And the problem is that people make that the whole experience of the path is a communal identity. And sometimes that just means like even a physical external identity of being Muslim. Right? And what being Muslim is then becomes this like cultural experience of, this is what we do, and we as a group do these things together. It's a part, meaning there's a wisdom in us coming together in Jama'at, this ijtima aspect, this social aspect. We need each other to reflect, like we're mirrors for each other, right? We need each other to come together for support, for help, this collectivist idea. And at the same time, coming back to this, polarities, you absolutely are left to sort this stuff out in your own heart on your own. We do not stand before Allah on the Day of Judgment with our community, with our family, with anybody. We're alone. We're alone before Allah. So we have to take responsibility and take account that our deen needs to include self-reflection and a private relationship with Allah. You shouldn't, this is why we don't have like the concept of the church or the mosque. There is no the mosque. There's a mosque that you go to put your head on the rug, and you get more blessings sometimes by being with other people. But that's it.
Whole
Like
earth
there
is
is
a
no,
mosque, right? The forest is
yeah,
a mosque. Your home is a mosque.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, we have to come into these points of intimacy with Allah and intimacy with ourselves. And I think, I guess we ask of what's some advice for people during this time is, there's some things that I would say are fundamental and foundational for how to become more familiar with being alone with ourselves. Because to be honest, as much as that can be a cultural thing, and a cultural sort of distraction of this socialized orientation to Islam, it's also just an avoidance that human beings have. Like we avoid ourselves. It's an innate quality of we don't want to face what we have to face because it's tough. We're afraid of what we're going to find if we look inward, because there's some things that maybe we haven't sorted out that can be ugly. And so we tend to be with other people to avoid ourselves. And so being with people, again, is beautiful, but in balance. And so what I would say is, if you have a hard time being alone, then don't avoid being alone, because that's just going to elongate the issue. It's going to be, you're kicking the can down the road. Mm-hmm. If you find that it's hard for you to be alone, that's a sign and a message that you need to learn how to be alone. You need to learn how to be alone with yourself so that you can uncover what's underneath the self is your direct connection with God. And so some tools to do that is first of all, just taking the time to be alone. Like for some of us, we avoid it, or we don't do it, or we don't have and so scheduling in your day some time to be alone is important. And that's really hard. I know for myself, I have 3 children. My wife and I we're in a house of 5 people, and we have young children that are needy, and it's tough to find alone time, right? But that means I have to get up in the middle of the night, and so it's worth it for me. And then when you've secured that alone time, then what you do in that time, uh, in addition to ibadah, like it's important to connect and do your practices of worship, but then I would say I would implore people to introduce a practice of self-reflection or muhasaba, and specifically just looking at yourself and taking account of yourself, having a conversation with yourself and looking like what's going on inside me, like why did I react to this thing in this way. And I think the most practical, tangible thing you can do is literally buy a journal and make this your muhasaba journal that you keep with you, and you reflect every day. You take 5 minutes a day to sit and write, what's going on, where are you at, what's and not only it's good to focus on gratitude, what you're grateful for, but then also at the same time, like what you're upset about or what you're noticing that's coming up that you're irritated by. um, we know that shaitan is in chains during the month of Ramadan, but that doesn't mean that we're completely pure and removed from our tendencies of the nafs. And even if you are this pure shining light of your pure ruh during this month, you still have the memory to look back and take account of yourself from over the year. Look at your behavior. Why did I react to this person in this way? Why was I so pulled and drawn towards this thing? Why was I so wanting this thing when it seems like the world is really not conspiring to make that happen? What is it about me that needs that thing? And make a note of it and start to write about it and start to uncover and unfold what's there. And it's really, this is an ongoing process, but I would say if you're not doing it, use this time to establish this as a practice. And then, that's kind of an ongoing sort of self-reflective thing. And then I would say the other really important thing is when you're alone, when you're choosing these times to be with yourself, you need to have a contemplative practice of learning to be still, just being still with yourself. I think breathing is the best way to come into that state of being still and present, because often we're not consciously breathing, we're like involuntarily breathing. So just try to have a voluntary practice of breathing and coming into being comfortable sitting with yourself. Because when you sit there and you sort of orient yourself to your physical experience of your being rather than your mental activity, and just sort of constantly bringing yourself to your heart and orienting yourself to your body, will help you connect with your being and being present. And there's a lot of detailed, deep techniques for doing that, but I think the basic is just practice. It's practicing being still.
Yeah, no, I think it's real. And I think I love the Muhasabah journal. That's a key element of my own life and all the courses we do. And I really, swear by it. And just to have that self-reflection, there's something it does. It almost like it's not that I'm going to write what I feel, but it's almost like you get to look in a mirror at yourself and see things you couldn't see without the mirror. It's like, oh, wow, that was in me, so
Right.
that's a powerful practice. And I think, obviously this is the month of the Quran. And so, often we focus on reading a bunch of Quran or standing in Taraweeh for, hours, which is obviously good. But I think this is really a good opportunity to really reflect on the meanings and to sit with the book and to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to
Yeah.
sit with, ourselves. And, so alhamdulillah, everything you said is great. And I think, I pray that there's great benefit for people, because um, no doubt it is a challenging time that we're all going through our various challenges and uncertainty and, quote unquote, negative emotions, right? Stress and worry
Yeah.
and concern and things like
Right.
that. But I think kind of what you're mentioning and really what's so beautiful about our tradition is that it accounts for this. There's a really profound tradition of understanding the states, understanding not only the states of ecstasy and bliss, but actually the states of deep contraction and difficulty
Mm.
that one goes through, and how to be in those states, how to orient oneself in those experiences, because even the most, fortunate human life is going to be faced with some serious difficulties, serious contractions, serious illness, serious loss of wealth and health, and even your own life eventually.
Mm.
And so how to be in those moments when those type of situations affect us. And I think that really gets back to what the practice is about. And that's why
Yeah.
the discipline is about that too. I mean, if you're just, came from another planet and you came to the right, 2-a-day football practice and you saw people like running until they collapse and like in the heat and all this stuff, it's like, why are you subjecting yourself to that? Well, it's for the game. It's so that you're in this elite
Mm.
shape, so that when it all matters, when the lights are on you, and when it's all for the for the trophy, you perform at this high level. And
Right.
likewise with spiritual practice, and with which I think we're broadly defining, which it's not separate from our wellness and mental well-being and even physical well-being. It's
No.
all part of the human being, or this one
Mm.
being that we are, and navigating this world with wisdom and grace. And so these practices of discipline and practice of uh you know self-sacrifice, and such as fasting, and they are helpful such that when you're in a position where you can't eat, or you can't go outside, or you can't speak to someone, or you don't feel well enough to get up, you're there and you know how to navigate those. And of
Yeah.
course it's a constant practice. None of us can claim to be at that level where we you know don't struggle with the difficult states, but there are those that get to a point where they even experience a type of bliss even in the constriction.
Yeah. And I think the constriction can be just can be the only focus. Like right now, particularly in this time, people are, I think, like, wow, this is so serious. This is so serious, and it is.
Mhm.
And there's this pandemic, and how can you focus on this spirituality stuff when like there's this real world out there there's this big problem? And this is where it really brings it into focus of like, well, how real is that world, and if this is not, this is also a part of God's plan. And we're told, even in the day of judgment, even in the last day, when the world is falling apart around us, we're told to, if we're planting a tree, continue planting the tree.
Mhm.
And that's such a deep metaphor of like, because when you're planting something, it's for the future. And if you're saying like the future of the dunya no longer, why would I plant a tree if I know the tree's not going to exist, right? Because it's the planting, it's the cultivating, it's the intention that we're here for, not the outcome. The outcome is not in our hands. The outcome is with Allah. But what we get out of doing this work and seeding and putting and caring for the seed is where the beauty comes from. And so it's not unrealistic to use this time um, to really bring things into focus, because if not now, when?
That's right.
Like do it now. Pay now or pay later. Like
Mhm.
let's respond and respond to this situation, and be with it, and take advantage of it. And then I guess I would just say one last thing on the idea of being alone. Yes, being alone, but then again, like we're with family, right? We're a lot of people are isolated with their family. Some people aren't, and so therefore whatever you get is what you get, right? What you get is what you need. Allah gives you what you need. And so if you're alone, you need time alone. If you're with your family, you need to honor that and say, like, you need to be with your family too. That doesn't mean you shut them out and you go into a room and you say, hey, this time is about halwa, so therefore I'm not talking to you guys. Like, no, part of it is, yes, take the time for yourself, but like, if you've been put with these people, there might be something that you need to sort out with these people. And so I would say, take advantage of that and take the courage to sort of face it and say, like, look, we're here together. Let's do some of this work together, and let's face some of the things we need to, and if that, maybe this is an opportunity for you to be more patient and more graceful, and apologize for the things that you didn't apologize for before, because here you are with this person, and it may be your opportunity to sort this stuff out, because we don't know when we're gonna die, like, and if you're stuck with these people and it hasn't been such a you haven't been at your best, now may be an opportunity for you to rectify that. So I think, paying attention.
MashaAllah, for sure. Yeah, I appreciate it, man. And I appreciate you sharing this. And I know before we close, I want to let people know where they can follow up with you. I encourage people that haven't listened to our first 2 podcasts to check it out. We really focus on, kind of Islamic model of the soul, spiritual psychology. But I know, and we also, inshallah, have a course for Rumi Center coming up together that people will be able to check out. So be on the lookout for that at RumiWorkshops.com.
The art of being, right?
Art of being, inshallah. And but in the meantime, I know you're doing some things this Ramadan. I know you're doing some classes with the Cambridge Muslim College. So why don't you share what you're up to and where people can find that?
Okay, so yeah, this whole month of Ramadan, Cambridge Muslim College is doing this like live Ramadan live, and it's a program of scholars from all around the world and doing free live lectures on their YouTube channel. So I'll be doing every day, Monday through Friday at 2 a.m. UK time, which is I think 9 p.m. Eastern time, and where I am it's 5 a.m. And they're short reflections called Midnight Moments, and we'll be talking about some of the same themes that we've been talking about here, presence and self-reflection, and how to really make the use of this time. And we will actually, so here, if in this podcast we didn't really touch on a lot of like specific practical advice, since I'll be there doing those live streams, I'll be doing basically 20 of them. So I have a lot more time. They're short, but I think each time we'll introduce some practices and sort of reconnect with those practices, and come together as a time to really make this about self-improvement. So that's happening. And then it seems like there's a lot of online live stuff happening. I'm doing some other things, but I think you can check out, usually I post things on my website, shifacounseling.com, so people can check things out there.
We'll put a link to that, inshallah, when we post this. Yeah, bro, I appreciate it. I pray you stay safe. Have a blessed Ramadan. Bless you and the family. And when this all blows over, we look forward to having you back in Seattle. And inshallah, we'll do a proper retreat in the Pacific Northwest in the old growth forest, inshallah.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. I love that. Inshallah. When we can all hug each other once again.
Ameen.
Inshallah. All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.